Welcome to another program emanating from the Career Laboratory at Pensacola Junior College. Since this is a career and life planning center, we'd like to talk today about identity, who are you, what are you, values and lifestyles, and how all of us can grow. Today we have the privilege of having with us in Pensacola the Peace Pilgrim. I can think of no one better to deal with this kind of subject than the Peace Pilgrim. Would you begin, Peace Pilgrim, by telling us what your pilgrimage is and why you're in Pensacola at this time?
Well, of course, I'm in Pensacola because I was invited to come to Pensacola by the Pensacola Junior College and other people. And I'm speaking, of course, at the college. Now, a pilgrim, of course, is on a journey with a purpose, not just wandering idly. A pilgrimage can be to a place or for a thing, and mine happens to be for a thing. Now, it covers the whole peace picture. It's for peace. Peace among nations, peace among groups, even peace with our environment. But most always I talk about peace among individuals. And the very, very important inner peace, I talk about that the most. Now, my subject is really human potential. Most people only scratch the surface of their real potential. They have no idea what they're capable of. I started out 25 years ago on this pilgrimage. On the back of my short tunic, it says 25,000 miles on foot for peace. And that makes a lot of contacts for me. On the front, it gives my name, Peace Pilgrim. And in 1964, I had finished counting the 25,000 miles, and I stopped counting, although I didn't stop walking. I have no visible means of support. This is part of a pilgrimage. I haven't got any money, and I don't even accept any money, and I don't belong to any organization, and I don't own anything except what you see. This is me and my only earthly possession sitting in this chair. I walk until given shelter, fast until given food. I don't even ask. It's given without asking. You know, people are good. There's a spark of good in everybody, no matter how deeply it may be buried. And of course, a pilgrim walks not only prayerfully, but as an opportunity to contact people. My short tunic makes my contacts for me. People are curious or interested. They stop and talk. And it's the kindest way to make contacts. It's the most effective way to make contacts. Let them approach you. And I often have an opportunity to share my peace message with them, which says in a single sentence, this is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, and falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. Good sound psychology. Whenever it's used, it works.
Mm-hmm. When did you start your pilgrimage?
January 1st of 1953.
And where does it take you to?
The 50 states, the 10 Canadian provinces, parts of Mexico. I'm on my 6th pilgrimage route. Well, I actually finished my 6th pilgrimage route in Pensacola. And then head for California, where I start a 7th pilgrimage route in the early spring.
What led you to decide upon this pilgrimage? Anything? When did you?
I had a 15-year preparation period. Yes, it wasn't in walking or speaking. It was inner preparation. My preparation for the pilgrimage began in earnest about 40 years ago when I came out of my meaningless life of money and things and started to live to give instead of to get. At that point, my life blossomed out. I attained the great blessing of good health. It's wonderful. I haven't had an ache or a pain or a cold or a headache for 40 years. And from that time on, I have known that my life work was going to be work for peace. And from that time on, I was engaged in another growing up. Now, I had already done the physical growing up long ago. And I had done the mental growing up. I had sufficient knowledge to get along, and I could make my own decisions. I had done the emotional growing up. I could get along with people and with myself. But at that point, 40 years ago, I started what I have come to call a spiritual growing up or a psychological growing up. It takes you from the self-centered life, or the life governed by the self-centered nature, into the life governed by the nature which is centered in the good of the whole, which sees you as a part of the whole and works for the good of the whole, which sees that you're a cell in the body of humanity, that every cell, every human being has, well, equal importance, equal potential, although in varied stages of growth, because we choose how much growing we do, and a job to do in the total scheme of things. That was my preparation for the pilgrimage. It took 15 years. And, you know, my hair had turned to silver when I started out on my pilgrimage. Oh, I can remember my friends simply thought I had taken leave of my senses when I told them I was going to walk across the country, which I did the first year. But, you know, I don't walk on the energy of youth. It was gone when I started. I walk on that endless, amazing energy which comes with having done the psychological or spiritual growing up, with having found inner peace.
I was going to ask the question about all this energy and enthusiasm you have. I'm aware that you've spoken many times on campus this week, and many students have been amazed at how much energy and enthusiasm you have. Where does it come from?
Well, of course, it never runs out. You see, you feel plugged in, and it flows through you. Well, it comes from the source of all energy. Being a religious woman, I would say it comes from God. But you see, there are conditions for plugging in. You know, I was walking out of a town, and a truck driver stopped to talk with me. He said, "I heard you say over the air something about that endless energy. And I just want to tell you that I had it one time." I said, "Yes, that's right. Sometimes under special circumstances it does become available." He said, "Well, I was marooned in a town by a flood, and I got so bored that I finally offered to help. And I got interested in getting people out." And he said, "I worked without eating, I worked without sleeping, and I wasn't tired." But he said, "I don't have it anymore." And I said, "Well, what are you working for now?" He said, "Money." I said, "That should be quite incidental. You have that endless energy only insofar as you're working for the good of the whole. As soon as you start working for your selfish little self, it's gone." That's the secret of it. In this world, you're given as you give.
Right. Well, are you, I know the students are amazed at your hitchhiking and walking so much, and they wonder about the dangers. And they're concerned a bit about your being in danger doing so much hitchhiking and walking.
I don't feel I'm in any way in danger because, you see, I have no fear. One of the things we're just coming to realize is that we create through thought. We constantly create through thought. We create our inner conditions. We hope to create the conditions around us. Now, if you're fearful, what will happen? You will attract the things you fear. I fear nothing and expect only good. So to me, only good comes. But then, of course, I'm always thinking about the best that could happen and all the good things that I want to see happen, because those are the things I want to emphasize.
Students often ask you, too, about your age.
Yes, but I can't tell them. I don't know. You see, I arrested my age 25 years ago. We create age, of course, through thought, too. We have a habit of counting birthdays and thinking of ourselves as getting older, and we do. I had sufficient age. I looked essentially the way I do now 25 years ago. At that point, I said, no more counting birthdays. And hereafter, I thought of myself as being ageless. And things have stayed rather the way they were. I haven't gotten younger, but I don't see any point in that. I can operate just fine as I am. You see, when you have learned the lessons of the seasons of life before, you have no wish to return to a prior season of life.
Right. Well, one of the explanations may be that you've eliminated a lot of hang-ups and barriers, and the channel is free for this flow of energy. Would you like to comment any further on that?
Oh, yes, it's necessary to remove a whole lot of barriers, of course, to get rid of all your hang-ups, your mindsets, and so on. Well, this is a subject that if I dealt with it in short order, I wouldn't deal with it very adequately, of course. I can tell you that it's a matter of living all the good things you believe in the beginning, because we usually believe way beyond what we live. So that's the way I started. I just took them one by one and worked on them. Mm-hmm. And if I could think of something I was doing that I knew I shouldn't be doing, I simply quit. For instance, I realized at one point that I wasn't living on what you would call a good health diet. So I quit that and started living on a good health diet. Started practicing prevention. All things known to be bad for your health, I simply cut out before I got sick. And then, if you can think of something you're doing that you know you shouldn't be doing, you can easily cut it out. But there's a more difficult thing than that. When you think of something that you know you should be doing that you aren't doing, now that might take a little more time. For instance, I wasn't being forgiving enough toward myself. Toward others, yes, no problem there. But toward myself, if I did something that wasn't the highest, I would say to myself, you ought to know better. And then one time, I was looking at myself in the mirror as I combed my hair, and I said, you vain thing. Why should you think you ought to know better when you forgive everyone else for not knowing better? You know better than they are. You must forgive yourself as readily as you forgive them, and then take a further step. Use all that energy you've been using on condemning yourself, on improving yourself. And then I started to get somewhere, because, there's only one person you can change, and that person is yourself. Now, of course, many have to get rid of things like worry habits and anger habits and fear habits. But there's another thing, too. We must find our job in the life pattern, because every one of us has a job, and we won't be happy until we find it. And you can work in two ways. It's your higher nature that knows what your job is, and so put yourself into inspirational circumstances so you will have an awakening of your higher nature and know what your job is. And the other way, since you already undoubtedly have had some awakenings, is to ask yourself, what do I like to do?
Right.
Because if it's your job, you will like to do it, and you will do it as easily and joyously as I walk my pilgrimage.
We emphasize in the Career Laboratory that one should know their interests, their personalities, and begin to look at these possibilities. Also the values, the important goals of life that are important to people. Who are you and what are you? And I believe you indicated there's a higher self and a lower self. And sometimes this is referred to as the ego on one hand, and the higher self, the transpersonal self, the potential self that we could become, the real, the non-phony. Mm-hmm. The non-role playing is to find that real self that wants to express.
Mm-hmm. It's given all kinds of names, you're right there. Mm-hmm.
But we tend to have energy for those things that we're interested in, aren't we?
Of course this is true. And it is quite true that your higher self, your self which is, well, I would say God-centered, being a religious woman, or centered in the good of the whole, you see. That self is your real self. The self-centered nature isn't your real self at all, you see. It's the other that's your real self.
So getting to the higher self instead of the lower self is to get rid of the hang-ups, then, really.
Oh, yes, I should say so. When that governs your life, all of these things are gone. But on the other hand, before it governs your life, there are techniques that you can use to get rid of some of the hang-ups, because that will help you to do enough inner growing, you see, so that your life will be governed by the higher self.
You, of course, travel quite a bit, and you observe a lot of young people in different kinds of lifestyles. And one of the things now medical doctors are saying is that we choose the habits and conditions or the styles that we live, and this along with preventive medicine. Now, you mentioned eating. You're a vegetarian.
Oh, yes, have been for 35 years.
And you attribute this somewhat to your good health. And how about exercise? Their doctors are saying everybody should exercise.
I get plenty of exercise walking. And of course, actually, I not only am a vegetarian, and let me give you one good reason for being a vegetarian. My original reason was that I don't ask anyone to do for me things I wouldn't do for myself. But do you know it takes many, many times the land to raise the creature and eat the creature as it would to raise the vegetables or fruits or grains and eat them? And I would want to see the maximum number of people fed. That's another good reason for becoming a vegetarian. I have also cut out things like white flour and white sugar and fried things and highly seasoned things. And of course, I live mostly on fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and the nuts and seeds and the whole grains. And I guess the best form of milk products would be yogurt and buttermilk, probably. Mm-hmm. I do eat cheese, if it's real cheese. Now, also, certainly I get enough exercise. Everybody should. I also get enough rest. Everybody should. But you see, aside from this, I think no negative thoughts. This is so very, very important. And, of course, also, a path of service is extremely important.
We try to emphasize that work can be a path of service in all of our lives, that we can express ourselves and fulfill ourselves in serving one another. And this is where the real enjoyment comes. And persons who perhaps do not find their calling and maybe don't have the positive attitude toward work are the ones that are bored and frustrated. And it does affect their entire lives.
You're right, of course. And I stress that anytime you feel rather low, as people say, then go out and help somebody else. Find something you can do to help somebody else, and it'll pick you right up.
Right. Now, you've mentioned lack of forgiveness or a form of energy turned within, and, of course, we know of fear and anxiety. All these things, I think you're saying that they live in us as our enemy.
Of course.
And in other words, if we have to forgive ourselves and rid ourselves, otherwise we're suffering the consequences, aren't we?
Yes, and of course what happens is that we hurt ourselves constantly by getting ourselves out of harmony. Now, if someone would do the meanest thing to me, my automatic reaction would be one of the deepest compassion for this out of harmony person who is able to do mean things, and I would never hurt myself by a wrong reaction of bitterness or anger. You see, we really have complete control over whether we will be hurt psychologically or spiritually or not, because, you know, we can only be hurt by our own wrong actions, and we have control over our actions, or our own wrong reactions, which are tricky, but we have control over them too, or our inaction in some situation that demands action of us. And when we realize this, of course, why, if we have good sense, we just simply stop hurting ourselves and start always thinking things on the positive side and doing things on the positive side and saying things on the positive side.
Now, we've mentioned about eating properly and exercising, and of course walking and jogging is highly recommended. What do you think about the meditation need that we may have, and of course the positive thinking? I think those are other dimensions.
Yes, well, we mentioned the positive thinking, and I would say that if you do not yet know your way, especially, then what you call meditation, silent receptiveness, in inspirational circumstances would be valuable to you. But some people would prefer to listen to beautiful, uplifting music, and some people would prefer to read a few beautiful words and ponder upon them. And some people might prefer to do what I did. I walked, receptive and silent, amid the beauties of nature, and these wonderful insights would come to me, which I would put into practice in my life. So do have an inspirational time, by all means.
Well, I was going to comment that, you know, the word, the medical doctors use the word inspire. In other words, inspiration is to breathe in, and to expire is to breathe out. And it happens that passing out of this life is expiring, or passing out the breath. But the inspiration, the intake of thoughts and feelings, is associated with the intake of breath. And I thought perhaps you'd want to comment on that.
Of course, they do associate this. The breath of life is very important. The soul enters and leaves with breath. But I realize that as far as the breathing is concerned, I got a whole lot of things at once when I walked receptive and silent amid the beauties of nature. From the beauty around me, I got my inspiration. From the silent receptiveness, my meditation. And from the walking, not only my exercise, but my breathing. 4 things at once. And you see, you can't be too pushy when you're doing 4 things at once. Some of these things should be handled very gently. You know, I always think of the bud of a flower. If you give it proper conditions, it will open into a beautiful flower. But if you become impatient and try to tear the petals apart, you permanently injure the flower or the earth fly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another analogy may be that in the acorn there's a tremendous potential, but it may take 40 or 50, 60 years of patience and being fed and providing shade for this majestic oak to develop. And if it had been rushed, it would never become the majestic oak.
That is absolutely true. And just so with human beings. You see, look at all the growing there is for human beings to do. It took me 15 years to do a growing I didn't even know existed, beyond the usual growing that we know of. And then I kept on learning and growing even beyond that. Learning and growing never ceases, but the struggle ceases between the two natures with the two different viewpoints, and you can learn and grow harmoniously without struggle. And the first lesson I learned was the lesson of receiving. I had been on the giving side for 15 years. Now I needed to learn to receive as gracefully as I was able to give in order to give the other fellow the joy and the blessing of giving.
Right. Very good. Is anything, well, one of the things we try to do in the Career Laboratory is help young people establish goals, like what is important in your life. And you may want to share with the persons watching this program as to important goals that you feel are worthwhile for realizing the human potential.
Well, of course, I set priorities in my life from the time that I was a child. I remember my priorities at that time were my homework and my chores, and I would get them done. And I remember also that I always really enjoyed other things. My girlfriends didn't always. They were too often worrying about their homework, which wasn't done. But my homework, my important things, that was all done, and so I enjoyed other things. Now, this taught me self-discipline, and it led to a very orderly life. I still have priorities in my life today. And then the pattern of choosing to be free. Not all people choose this. In fact, we choose for ourselves a variety of enslavements. I remember when I was a child, I was offered real cigarettes from a package, which I didn't smoke, but my friends did. In high school, I was offered every kind of alcohol you can think of, which I didn't drink, but my friends did. Now, I faced a test in this regard just beyond my student days. All my friends at that time used both alcohol and tobacco, and with this push toward conformity in those days, they actually looked down on me because I didn't. And gathered in someone's living room, I said to them, look, life is a series of choices. Nobody can stop you from making your choices, but I have a right to make my choices too. And I have chosen freedom. And then I went right on to choose freedom from other enslaving things like negative thinking, meaningless activities, unnecessary possessions. It stayed right in that pattern all through my life.
Is there really freedom without self-discipline?
There cannot be. You see, you are definitely not free if you do not have self-discipline. Actually, the self-centered nature is never completely free because it is governed by the wishes for comfort and convenience on the part of the body, by the demands of the mind, and by the outbursts of the emotions. It is only the higher nature that can control body, mind, and emotions. And of course, constantly in your early life, you're going through that struggle between body, mind, and emotions and the self-centered nature, which is using them to some extent without ever being fully able to control them.
Now, I've often said that if one isn't disciplined from within, and that's the best discipline one can have, then there has to or should be some external control, certainly when they're children. One of the problems in our society, it seems that we don't make the transition from external control to self-discipline. Somewhere along we grow up and we take charge of our own lives, or we should. And of course, again, we have permissiveness and lack of control, either external or internal.
The children, when there is external control, you see, learn best through example. It really doesn't matter what you say, it's what you do that the child follows. So I would wish for all children, of course, that the adults around them are always very good examples.
Right. Now, I know some comments have been made this week that you are living the laws of the universe. You're facing reality. Would you like to comment further on that?
Well, of course. Naturally, I'm living.
See, oftentimes people think reality is what I can see and touch and feel.
Worse than that, they think if you're a realist, what you're doing is living by the dictates of the self-centered nature.
Right.
And I would say that this isn't being a realist. This is only doing a tiny bit of the growing that you're able to do. If you're a realist, you live up to the highest light you have, which makes you an idealist. So you see, I don't see that they're that far apart.
Well, I think where we get hung up in society, we say that which is material is real, I can touch, it's tangible. I think what you're saying is that which is enduring is real. That which has eternal value is real. Now, why, and I don't want to get into to an area that it would take a lot of time, but why do you feel that this track of thinking and thought, the eyes may blind us and the ears may deafen us, what was the creative purpose of this? In other words, having to find that real self, having to find discipline and all. It seems like it's difficult because the easy way is the way of material sensory experience.
Well, of course, that the self-centered nature identifies with the body and with material things, you see. It's only as you transcend the self-centered nature that you get beyond identifying with the body and with material things. So it's quite natural in the beginning to feel this way. But when you're getting into college and when you're studying philosophy or something like that, it is possible to realize that in most essentials, actually, being a realist is living up to the highest light you have, just as being an idealist is. The only difference is there is some validity to saying that if you are a realist, you understand that growing takes time, you see, and you're willing to have the time and the patience for the growing, whereas if you are an idealist, you sometimes want it to go just like that, you see. Now, there is validity, perhaps, in saying a thing like that. But I would think that if you grow enough, you would come to the point where you see that there's only one thing that's real in this universe. Of course, I would say God is real. And within you, it is only the higher nature that is real. Even the self-centered nature can be transcended, and the body certainly is very transient.
So you're saying that to realize the real person, we have got to aspire toward the perfection and really the idealism. The ideal is to become what we're capable of becoming,
yes,
which requires effort and requires a journey in goals. But perhaps the enjoyment and fulfillment of life is in that journey and in that discovery.
Why, of course, what are we here for? But to learn and grow. This is our purpose for being here. The earth is a school. And so do all the learning and growing you possibly can, and do all the serving, the giving that you possibly can.
And you think this applies to everybody? Everybody's here to serve.
Oh, of course.
And to help one another.
Of course we are. Why, we're cells in the same body of humanity. We all sink or swim together. The lessons on the outer level that we need to learn are the lesson of the non-killing of human by human and the lesson of sharing. You see, these are obviously our lessons. And I believe that things are much better than they were when I started. When I started, people accepted war as a necessary part of life, whereas now I'm on the popular side. When I started, there was little interest in the inner search, whereas now there is an almost universal interest in the inner search, which to me is the most hopeful sign of all.
Peace, Pilgrim. Our time is about up. Would you like to give a parting word or message to the people who are watching at this time?
My magic formula. There is a magic formula, I say that facetiously, for resolving conflicts. It is this. Have as your objective the resolving of the conflict, not the gaining of advantage. There is a magic formula for avoiding conflicts. It is this. Be concerned that you do not offend, not that you are not offended. That works between individuals, between groups, or between nations.
Thank you, Peace Pilgrim, for being on our campus, all the things you've done and shared and inspired this week. And you're going to be back in Pensacola in about 6 or 7 years. We look forward to having you.
6 years. I look forward to it. And in the meantime, peace to all.
Thank you, and bless you,
peace.
and peace to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.